So now we've got a quarterback room that involves Jack Miller, who started the bowl game. That involves Graham Mertz, the incoming transfer from Wisconsin, who's played a lot of football, started a lot of games, won a lot of games, hasn't been the best in regards to production. So, what is your thought about where it stands from a quarterback perspective and what Billy Napier's looking to do?
Yeah, Mark, I think you got to probably ride with Graham Mertz right now over Jack Miller as the Gators get ready to go. Probably head into spring practice, early March here, and I would think Graham Mertz is going to be the number one guy. Not ready to completely shut the door on Jack Miller because I think the staff liked him last year, then dealt with an injury that held him out for most of this past season, and then probably look, I'm not that high on Jack Miller anyway, but I'm not going to hold that bowl game against him so much either. That was just, Florida, not a shell of itself from this past season. And look, everybody knows when they play Oregon State and how many players have already left Florida before that. And since then, that was not a full team out there. I'm not going to judge him too harshly on that. But as it looks right now, I think the experience of Graham Mertz probably wins out here for Florida when they get into spring practice. But the question for Graham Mertz, and we had a big episode on Gators Breakdown with him this week, and this is diving into the type of quarterback that maybe he can be at Florida. And look, at Wisconsin, it was take advantage of the weaker part of the schedule, but when the schedule ramped up, the competition ramped up, Graham Mertz just wasn't there to be found as that consistent quarterback. And, can Billy Napier unlock some more consistency? Can we go back to his recruiting profile and that be the type of quarterback Billy Napier gets with Graham Mertz? And it will be I don't think the Wisconsin offense did him any favors, Mark. If you go watch a Wisconsin game, you pull some numbers, it was pretty predictable run, pass. Run, pass. He was not in a lot of advantageous situations at Wisconsin there with Paul Chryst, and they went through a coaching change. He had 3 different offensive coordinators the last 3 years. So there was a lot to point to that said maybe Wisconsin didn't put him in the best situation, but at the same time, was there trust in Graham Mertz? Was there trust for him to be able to throw on first down and maybe lighten the box a little bit? I mean, this was a team that you knew they were going to run on first down, and then it was going to be 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6, and Graham Mertz has got to go throw his way out of that. So we'll see. We also kind of broke it down a bit that as much as Wisconsin ran the ball, they didn't run a lot of play action, and Graham Mertz in his time there did throw pretty well off of play action, but for whatever reason, they didn't run it a whole lot. So, I do think, what can Graham Mertz do different than Anthony Richardson did last year? Well, we know he's not going to bust a 60-yard run out of nowhere. So how does Billy Napier adjust to a quarterback that's more of a pocket passer than the Levi Lewis he had at Louisiana, than more the Anthony Richardson he had in his first year at Florida? So I think there's some adjustments going to be made by Billy Napier as well for a quarterback like Graham Mertz and how he fits and tailors the offense to him. But, is the quick, short game now more of an advantageous situation for Billy Napier in this passing game? Because that's where Anthony Richardson struggled last year. The short, quick pass game, the screens, the quick slants. He struggled in those situations last year. So, Graham Mertz probably is a little bit of a upgrade in that area. But Mark, and I said this on Gators Breakdown, when Anthony Richardson left and we knew Florida was probably going to hit the transfer portal, there were a few questions I asked myself about what type of quarterback they should get. Well, Florida's got a retooled offensive line. So the running game may not be as good as it was last year. Okay, can you go find a quarterback that's going to make up for that? I'm not so sure Graham Mertz is that guy. Florida, 3rd year in a row where they've had terrible defense. All right, can they go out there and get a quarterback that can make up for a really bad defense? I'm not so sure Graham Mertz is that guy either. So I think there's some questions I had overall about the team, and can they go get a quarterback that can make up for some deficiencies? I'm not so sure Graham Mertz is that guy.
Graham Mertz, a former 5-star, and the first time he stepped on the field against Illinois, he hit some ridiculous amount, 20 for 21, 5 touchdown passes, and people thought, well, they're taking off from there, and it just hasn't happened for him. And, everything that David says, believe me, I watch a lot of Wisconsin football, and it sounds all stereotypical, but that is Wisconsin football. They live up to the stereotype. That's who they are. He's throwing 16 to 20 passes per game, and most of them are on 3rd and 8. Because they put him in that situation. On the other hand, that's the defense for Graham Mertz, not an opportunistic type situations that favor him. On the negative side, it's, well, he is supported by a great running game. The offense isn't on his shoulders, and he should be able to supplement that. And a lot of times against the better teams, as you mentioned, he wasn't able to do that. Should be interesting. Looking at the latter portion of the season, the big win against South Carolina, then, the last few weeks were disappointing. The bowl game was a disaster to a certain extent. How much you lay that at Billy Napier's feet, who knows, based on guys not coming back. But he was able to rebound from a recruiting standpoint with some real big hits, both in 2023 and in 24. And now comes this Jaden Rashada business. Where do you think Billy Napier is in the eyes of Gator Nation right now?
Mark, that's a good question. Yeah, you're right. The end of the season, you got that big win over South Carolina, and that was preceded by a win over Texas A&M. And you're like, okay, maybe Florida's turning the late season around. And you still had a game versus Vanderbilt, which everybody wrote with a Sharpie as a win, and that was very, very disappointing. And then, all right, well, disappointing, but maybe you can save your season and go beat Florida State. And Florida gave it a valiant effort, but fell short in that game too. And then, like you said, you take what you want to from the bowl game, but disappointing end to the season for the Gators, and somewhat disappointing close to the cycle as well. There was a final visit weekend Florida had before the bowl game. They did lose a recruiting weekend because they played in that bowl game, and how much that really have a factor, I don't think a whole lot. I think can be kind of overdone in that aspect. But Florida had that visit weekend before the bowl game and was feeling really good about 6 prospects out of that final visit weekend, and then struck out on all of them. And the Samson Okunlola was the headliner of that group, the offensive lineman that ended up committing to Miami. And at one time, Florida was feeling pretty comfortable there, and feeling comfortable for a few other guys who visited that weekend. And the finish didn't happen there for Florida. So, and then, as you said, Rashada is now not part of this class, or a class that was hovering top 10 for the Gators. Now, if you want to just go by rankings, you look to be in that, in the fifth, I think 15 is what it is now without Rashada, if you do the calculations. So that's where Florida ends up in the 24/7 Sports composite. Still a pretty good player average ranking overall for the class, but only 20 players now. And I think that was 20 players last cycle as well. So only 40 players in the 2 recruiting cycles for Billy Napier. You've had mass defections off the roster from guys transferring out of the program. And you got some transfers in from this cycle too for the Gators. You were able to hit some offensive linemen, headlined by Micah Mazuka, the transfer from Baylor, who I think is a plug and play, one of the best guards in the country. He probably pretty much take over probably left guard, so won't necessarily really take over for Osiris Torrance there at the right guard spot, but still one of the best guards in the country. He's used to playing on that left side. And then Taraja Mitchell, Mark, I mean, I know you know a bit about him from Ohio State. Had a pretty good 21 season until late in that year, where he didn't finish that season, didn't play in 2022 hardly at all. Looked like it'd be some mental health that he needed to take care of. So maybe a fresh look, fresh start for him, where he's going to get plenty of ample opportunity to go earn a spot at the linebacker spot for Florida, where they lose Amari Burney, where they lose Ventrell Miller this past year there. So, that headlines, I think, Florida's transfer portal class too, besides Graham Mertz, and also Cameron Jackson, big-time defensive tackle transfer from Memphis. Plug and play. He's going to be an instant impact, where Florida needs all the help they can get there on the defensive front. So it was a slow start to the transfer portal acquisitions for Florida, but has come on as late. And this weekend have another big visitor, Kentucky. He was a true freshman last year. Kentucky offensive lineman Keonta Goodwin. I hope I'm saying his first name right. He was a true freshman last year and one of the top offensive linemen in the country as a recruit last year. He's going to visit Florida this week. Mark, Florida needs bodies. Florida needs a talent infusion there at offensive line after they lost Michael Tarquin to transfer to USC. Ethan White's still in the transfer portal right now for the Gators as well. Those were 2 guys we were thinking was going to be on this 2023 Gator team, but they're transferring out of the program after losing Osiris Torrance to the NFL, after losing Richard Garage to the NFL. So only returning 1 starter from a pretty good offensive line last year. They had to hit the transfer portal. Looks like they're going to continue to hit the transfer portal. And that leads to 2023, Mark. I don't know a lot of Gator fans, after a 6-7 season, kind of disappointing in Billy Napier's first year. They're not a positive outlook for 2023, but they do look forward to, as you said, a 24 class that has commits right now from DJ Lagway and Graham, the linebacker, 2 of the top players in the country there. Right now, I think if they were to rate the 24 class, that'd be 2 5-stars there for the Gators if you want to go by that top 30-ish, 35 players. So a good start to 24 that the Gators, are going to have to kind of just weather this Jaden Rashada story moving forward for the 24 class and try to build that class with Billy Napier, finally getting some relationships in the state of Florida.
Most of these transfer portal decisions a year and 2 years ago, I could make sense out of based on the player's situation at their current school. But now more and more, and Walker Howard, there's another guy that could have come to Florida. And of course, Billy Napier offered him really early. I think the first offer he ever received at Louisiana.
Yep.
So that relationship's been in play for a long time. And there was hope that Walker Howard was going to make that decision. He goes to Ole Miss with two other quarterbacks there that want to be starters, that have the type talent that you would think would be starters. So the more
that storyline's weird, and that storyline's weird, Mark, because Jackson Dart was already there. So he probably okay. Maybe I'll sit one more year, but maybe I can still go compete. But then the day after he commits, who gets Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State, and then begs the question: did he know about that? It was just a day before he commits to that. But yeah, as you mentioned, the Florida angle of that, there was a relationship with Billy Napier, and I don't know if the Rashada storyline, Florida's still trying to figure that out, and maybe slow played Howard just a little bit, and it put him behind the 8 ball in dealing with that recruitment. But that was one more quarterback they probably could have had maybe if they had identified it sooner.
So on the surface, in terms of playing time and opportunity, because you mentioned all those offensive linemen leaving, the decisions by these student athletes don't seem to be making as much sense as they did before, because we don't know the NIL offers out there. And so maybe I would hope that they're not making decisions based on because the 13 million, folks, that's an outlier that they're not making a decision because I can make 80,000 here instead of 65,000 there,
right,
even though that's a better opportunity in terms of playing time.
Yeah, and especially for a Florida offensive line group that's, even Rob Sale and Darnell Stapleton, the offensive line coaches there for Florida, pretty good reputation dating back to Louisiana, putting a couple guys in the NFL, Osiris Torrance, unearthing him at Louisiana, transferring to Florida, putting him in the NFL as well. So, there is a pretty good reputation for those offensive line coaches of putting guys in the NFL. So you do hope, hey, if it's NIL or if it's something like that, don't let that deter you from being coached by pretty good offensive line coaches right here.